Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be tier ranking every movie I reacted to in 2021. So this is technically not every movie, obviously. There's not like, I think I almost did like 70 something movies this year. This is only like 40, I think, maybe a little bit less than 40. That's because I excluded any movie that I've already tier ranked on a prior live stream. I did 3 live streams these past couple months. I did one back in September where I tier ranked a bunch of popular adventure franchise movies, and included in that was Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, Harry Potter movies, and 1 or 2 other franchises that I've already tier ranked in that live stream, so I kept those out of here. I didn't include those here for that reason. I also did a ranking of all the slasher movies I've seen, or at least most of the more popular ones, and that included Scream and of course Texas Chainsaw. So if you want to see me ranking those, go check out those videos, or those live streams. They're actually live streams. And also I did all the comic book movies I've seen very recently, tier ranked all of those. That included the X-Men franchise, the Blade movies, the DC movies I reacted to. So that excludes a lot of the movies that I've already reacted to this past year. This is just everything else, everything that I didn't already tier rank, all here. All movies I reacted to, or at least upload a reaction video to in 2021. There's only like 1 movie on here that I haven't posted a reaction to yet because I'm still editing that video, but we'll get to that. This is in order as well, so it goes from early 2021 all the way down to December 2021, and I don't even have an F tier here. It's just S through D because I honestly don't think any of these movies deserves F tier. Just looking at it real quickly, I don't even think any of these movies are going to go into D tier. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will go into D tier, but most of them are going to be pretty high up because I watched some really damn good movies this year. You guys recommend some good stuff, so it's going to be an interesting little ranking here. I'm going to try to do this, every year, at least as long as I'm doing this damn channel. And let's just start it up. So starting off with Kill Bill Volume 1. I did both the Kill Bill movies. They kind of felt like, just one full chapter, of course, or one full story. It didn't really feel like separate movies because it was the same story. It was just continued into a second part. And honestly, I think I preferred the second one just a little bit, but not by a lot. They're very close. I think they're very close in quality. I'm going to put both of them in B tier though. That might seem low for some people, but then again, B is like good. These are good movies. A is like great, S is masterpieces, C is like just average, and D is starting to get into the movies that I consider to be kind of meh. B is still good. These are good movies. I enjoyed them, but out of everything from Tarantino I've watched so far, I think these are my least favorite. The only other Tarantino movies I've seen so far is Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained, which I do prefer over Kill Bill. But Kill Bill was still solid. I loved a lot of the over-the-top crazy action that they went with. I mean, that was some wild stuff, especially in the first movie. The second one, I think I enjoyed the story a little bit more. You had Michael Madsen's character, which was a lot of fun to watch. And I just somewhat preferred how the story was told in the second one over the first. But again, not by a lot. This is a really fun duology of movies to watch. And I've heard people say that they should do a third one, but I honestly don't think that would make any sense. Just leave it as is. It was a solid story, a long 5-hour story if you put the 2 movies together. And I enjoyed myself watching them a lot. I want to see more Tarantino movies now that I've, of course, seen a couple of them, and I've definitely enjoyed a lot of them. Next, we have Speed. Speed is getting easy S. Speed was one of the funnest movies I watched, and just overall one of the best made films. There's a couple of things that are a little bit over the top that get a little bit ridiculous, but like for example, the bus getting past that like hole in the bridge, that was like a little bit much, but I didn't really care because the movie itself was so adrenaline pumping from start to finish. I mean, Keanu Reeves is obviously always a plus in these movies because he's just a great actor. We've seen a lot of Keanu Reeves movies this year. I mean, you look at this list real quick. We have Speed, Point Break, the Matrix trilogy, plus Resurrections, and then we also have the John Wick trilogy. So a lot of Keanu Reeves this year. But Speed was one of the most enjoyable ones for me, and it ended up being within my top, I think, 50 or at least top 100 favorite movies of all time because I love this story. The idea of it is so interesting, just this bus that's going to explode if the bus goes beyond, or not beyond, but before 50 miles per hour. It goes less than 50 miles per hour, it explodes, right? And that it arms after it goes 50. And that concept is just so interesting, and the way it plays out is so brilliant, and the way they solve the situation is so brilliant. Sandra Bullock's also really good in it. So all around, a fantastic movie. There's not much else to say other than it was a good time. That reaction video is one of my favorites. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, because I was having a blast with that. Absolute blast. Then we have Godzilla. So of course, I watched all 3 of the Godzilla movies this year, leading up to Godzilla vs. Kong. We didn't do King Kong because I've already seen that prior, so there was no reason to do a reaction video. But Godzilla, the first one, I'm going to give it an A. I think it was a solid movie. I do think it could have been a little bit better with the story going on with the people, but as a whole, it felt like a disaster movie in the way that, like, when Godzilla appeared, it was like this crazy thing. Like, holy shit, you know, cities were getting leveled, tons of disasters were unfolding. So it did feel like a disaster movie in that way, where it was less focused on the monsters and was more focused on the effect it has to the people. And I do like that. I wasn't against that. But I think Godzilla King of the Monsters was just a little bit better in how it handled that, with a lot of the monster action was just phenomenal in this movie. I didn't like the people stuff nearly as much as I liked in the first one. It felt like they focused on them less, which made sense because it's what people wanted, but I couldn't really care about the characters because of that. So it was just more of a fun movie as opposed to a good movie, I guess. But the monster stuff was just so good to the point where I didn't really care, and I really had a fun time with this movie, and it got me really pumped for Godzilla vs. Kong. Point Break. Point Break was a solid Keanu Reeves movie. I'm going to give it low A. Low A tier sounds good to me. I've heard that there's a remake and it's apparently terrible, so I'm probably not going to choose to watch it anytime soon, but this movie itself was a very interesting story. I had no idea what to expect going into it. I knew it was going to be about surfing because I saw surfing on the poster, but I didn't know there was going to be action elements included in it, and I thought it really worked well. And the sort of story between Keanu Reeves' character and the other characters in the movie was just really well thought out and a lot of fun. Like, this is a movie that I haven't rewatched since, but I kind of want to, because I remember really enjoying it and having a really good time with it. And it was recommended a lot after seeing Speed. A lot of people said this was like Keanu Reeves' first like big movie, or was it? I don't know. It was his first big action movie, at least. I think he might have did something before this, so it was pretty big, but this was like his first big like action movie, and eventually led him to doing a lot more action in the future. And thank God it did, because he's been great with it. Next, we have True Lies, a movie that was really suggested a lot because I did a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff back in 2020. We did, the Terminator movies, we did Predator, and was there any other Arnold? Oh yeah, Total Recall, which I loved all of those. So people were saying, you gotta do True Lies, you gotta do True. And I was waiting for it because I couldn't find a version of it anywhere, but eventually it ended up, I believe, on HBO Max. So I was able to watch it, or it was somewhere. It might have been Amazon Prime, I don't remember, but I was very glad to see it because, yes, it is an S movie to me. It is one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movies, in my opinion, which is hard to say because, there's so many good ones, but this was one of his most interesting roles. It was definitely your typical, 90s, 80s action movie, and I think it worked very damn well, and I want to see more movies like this, so I'm sure there's more that you guys can recommend that are similar to True Lies, because it was one of those type of stories that I think I find very interesting. And it almost felt like Mr. and Mrs. Smith at some points, because it was interesting how eventually he ends up working with his wife. Previously he wasn't, and she was completely, blind to his side job. But eventually she gets involved in it, and they're working together, which reminds me of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, just because it's like two people who are working in this spy assassin type business, and seeing her eventually getting involved in it was interesting. They could have done a sequel to this. I feel like a sequel would have made sense, but I guess not. Independence Day. Independence Day, I think, is going to go right here in A. Great movie. Solid movie. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it above Godzilla even. I think it's deserving of that. I just don't think it's enough to throw onto S, but the movie felt very, very American in a lot of ways. But it was so interesting how they had so many different characters in so many different places, and it all just kind of comes together in the end, and it felt very fitting. Obviously, Jeff Goldblum was fantastic in this. You had Will Smith as well. He was great. And all the different other characters. all had a really distinct purpose in this film, and it was interesting. It was interesting how the story played out with these aliens, and eventually they had to kind of attack this ship, and they end up winning. And I heard there's a sequel, haven't seen it yet, don't know if I ever will, but I absolutely love this film, even if it's just a one-off thing for me, because if I don't ever watch the second one, then it would be a one-off thing for me, but I loved it. The director for this film has done a lot of other disaster movies, and I tend to like his movies. I like his, disaster movie. 2012 is one of them that I'm thinking of, and I absolutely love that movie, and it felt a lot like it, so I didn't really surprise me that it was made by the same director, but when I went into it, I didn't actually even know it was by the same director, but I did mention a few times that a lot of it does feel like those other disaster films, and there are other movies that he has made, so it makes sense. Next up, Godzilla vs. Kong. I like this bit more than the other two Godzilla movies, surprisingly. I think just when you bring in King Kong, it just makes sense. It's going to be more exciting just to have all of that. But I don't think it's deserving of S tier, though. I think I'm going to put it high A. No, just right here. Not above Independence Day. But it's a pretty high tier movie for me. It was actually one of my favorite movies of 2021. It's a 2021 movie. It's only a couple of the movies on this list are actually movies that released in 2021, but this was one of those, and it ended up being my number 8. Yeah, I think it was my number 8 of my top 10 favorite movies of this year in terms of movies that released this year. So yeah, I think it deserves it. It was a really fun, crazy movie with a lot of awesome monster action between Godzilla and Kong, and of course, everything with Mechagodzilla was even cooler. Just seeing that in live action was insane. So, pretty solid movie. Mortal Kombat, I think, is gonna get high B. I really like this movie. I just didn't care as much for the story. I feel like the story didn't drag me in as much as I hoped it would. But I love the Mortal Kombat games, so seeing these characters in live action was a lot of fun. Seeing them fight each other. The action was well choreographed. It was definitely solid in terms of that, and the brutal, gore and such that they went with in the different scenes where it was a lot of fun. I just think it should have done a little bit more. Should have done a little bit longer. Maybe had a couple more moments to let us kind of learn more about these characters, because I didn't really care all that much about much of them, unfortunately. But that's just, when you got a short movie, it's hard to really do all that. When you got a lot of characters in this movie, it was hard for them to clearly kind of bring it all together, but it was enjoyable enough for me to give it B tier, so I'm not too annoyed with it. The Long Kiss Goodnight, I guess you could say this is a True Lies type-esque movie. Not really, but it's got similar feels to it, and I loved The Long Kiss Goodnight. Actually, I'm gonna put it probably above Independence Day in A tier. Yeah, Long Kiss Goodnight was solid, man. This was one that was recommended. Everyone said it was a very underrated movie. Not a lot of people talk about it, but apparently it was really solid. I'm really glad you guys recommended it, because yes, I loved it. Especially, anything with Samuel Jackson is going to be a plus for me, but he was one of the best parts of this film. I loved Sam L. Jackson in this damn movie, man. It's hard for me to really express how much I love him as an actor, because I've seen him in so many things, but he's great, and he was great in this. And then the main character, of course, I believe she's played by Gina Davis. I think that's her name. Yeah, that's her name, Gina Davis. She was great. She was awesome. She had some of the coolest action sequences to go with, because she was this character who had this kind of amnesia because of some really bad head injury, and it was really interesting how it played out, how she regained her consciousness. I kind of looked into it. Apparently, it's very unrealistic how this movie went down, but at the end of the day, it's a movie. It's like, that's not how apparently amnesia works. The way it works this movie, it's not really handled accurately, but I don't care, because it's a movie, and it was played out in a way that made sense for the story, and it made for some awesome scenes. And I liked how her personality started kind of changing as the movie went on. It went from her being this, very motherly like person to her badass past self kind of seeping her way into her character's personality, and that was really cool to me. A Quiet Place. So I love this movie a lot. I'm gonna put it probably above Speed even. Yeah, I just, A Quiet Place was so good. I like the second one as well. The second one ended up being within my top 10 favorite movies of this year. I did not react to that though, so it's not going to be on this list. But you guys know I talked about it on a recent video that I did ranking my top 10 favorite movies of 2021. But this one I reacted to in this year, so it's here. And yeah, it was that good. It's one of my favorite horror movies ever, of course, because the idea alone is interesting enough to get me very invested. I mean, it's these monsters that only can detect you by sound, so that just makes everything so much more frightening when everyone has to be so quiet in a world where, I mean, we make noise all the time. I mean, you've got to speak to make noise. You got to like communicate and stuff. So like they had to learn sign language and stuff, which was good for this family because they already knew sign language because of their daughter being deaf. So it definitely gave them an advantage. And I like how they, kind of explored that and brought that into the plot. It made a lot of sense to do that. The acting was great. John Krasinski was great. Emily Blunt was great. The soundtrack was great, and the way everything played out was also really great. It's a short movie, it's not even that long, but everything plays out in such an intense and just action-packed way, and it's one of the most nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat movies I've ever seen in my entire life. So, Quiet Place, great. The Matrix, bottom of S. I think people might expect that to be higher because it's The Matrix, but I didn't love it as much as that, but I still think it's a damn masterpiece. So it's still going to be getting S tier for that reason. Just the way all the action stunts were done and the interesting concepts that were explored, it's like nothing you've seen before, especially for that time, for 1999. I mean, maybe if I watched it back then, I'd love it even more, but even looking at it today, it's just like, this is awesome. Like the stuff that they're able to do in it. Unfortunately, the sequels didn't live up to it, but I still think even Reloaded is okay. Like Reloaded, I'm still gonna give bottom of A, or even above Point Break, I would say, because I actually liked Reloaded. I thought the action was just as good as the first one, but the story wasn't as good as the first one. The story definitely was much less interesting, and it was more complicated than it needed to be. And then Revolutions, the third one. This is the one I think dropped the ball and would go, in my opinion, down into, I'm gonna say C tier. I don't think it's meh, but I think it's very average. So yeah, it's gonna get a solid C tier for me, unfortunately. But that might be the lowest movie on this list. I don't even think a single movie is gonna go to D tier, to be honest. I really don't. So but this one just fell short. I thought the action was still pretty interesting and still enjoyable, but it didn't do it for me. Saving Private Ryan, that is easily S tier up here. I mean, this is one of the best war movies I've ever seen. Very brutal, very real in a lot of the ways it presented the war. And the characters, you cared about all of them thoroughly because the movie did a great job of developing them throughout the film. And I'm never gonna forget this one. This is a solid damn movie, and I definitely need to rewatch it because I haven't yet. But one of Steven Spielberg's best movies, in my opinion. And another Steven Spielberg movie we watched, Ready Player One, also going to go into S tier, but just the bottom of S, though. I don't think it's going to go any higher than that. Actually, no, I'll put it above Matrix. That might be sacrilege to do that, but I really love this movie, and I love video games a lot, so having a movie presented around that possibility of the future was just interesting, even though I really doubt we'll go this direction in the future, but it was interesting to explore that concept. And I mean, a lot of video games or virtual reality games are almost like this in a lot of ways today, so it is somewhat realistic in what they're trying to represent. And I thought the story was really interesting and how it all played out, and having a lot of the action being in the animated universe, and then having some stuff in the real world also being presented. And very fun movie, very great story and themes about like capitalism and all that, and just the way you had different characters being represented. Great movie. One of my favorites from Steven Spielberg as well, which, I mean, he makes a lot of great movies, so it's hard to compare when there's so many great ones. The Sixth Sense is another S tier movie. We did a lot of S tiers in a row here, man. I'm gonna put it honestly right here. Actually, yeah, right here. Above True Lies. Definitely above True Lies. I loved The Sixth Sense, man. And this was such a very different movie than what I usually watch, but man, it was good. Especially the twist. The twist is one of the best parts of it, and you don't really see it coming. I personally didn't see it coming. I don't know if other people did, but I would never in a million years guess that to happen. And the fact that it happened was just crazy because it was like blowing your mind insane. And the story itself was also really good. It had a lot of cool horror elements to it that were definitely creepy and interesting, and I loved it. I loved it a lot. Fight Club is going to get a nice little A tier. probably around right there. I don't like it more than this, but no, I do. Fight Club was really good. Fight Club was such an interesting movie, almost in the same way of The Sixth Sense, where it was all character driven about, you know, the main characters there, and the twists are also mind-blowing and insane. I need to do more David Fincher movies. I know I haven't done many. I've only done this and 7, I believe. I need to see some of his other ones because he is a great director. He's very character-driven with his storytelling, and that's the type of stuff I like. So I gotta do more of that. Interstellar. Don't even have to think about it. Don't even have to think about that one. That's by far my favorite movie on this list. By far. Like, no questions asked. Right now, currently, I think it's my number 3 favorite movie of all time. So, yeah. It's up there. After rewatching it as well, that solidified that for me. It's a gorgeous movie. Amazing storytelling with the characters. I mean, it solidified Christopher Nolan as my favorite director of all time. I've only seen 5 of his movies. I have to watch the other ones because how much I love those 5 movies that I have seen from him, but just from those 5 movies alone, they're some of my favorite movies ever. So yeah. Don't even think about that. One of the most emotional on this list. The best soundtrack from any movie I've ever seen as well. Hans Zimmer just kills it in this movie. So yeah, that's easy for me. Don't even have to think about that. Hereditary might be unpopular, but I'm gonna put it bottom of B tier. I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was good, but I didn't see the love for it as much other people did. Just, I felt like a lot of it was just things for the sake of scaring the shit out of you, but it wasn't as scary as I think people said it to be. It was fucking, like, what's the word? Horrific. I don't even know how to describe it. That one scene was traumatizing when the girl, you know what scene I'm talking about. But then the rest of the movie, it definitely felt a lot slower. I don't know. A24's movies, I think, are enjoyable enough. Like, I enjoyed myself watching them. I'm like, that's really interesting. It's an interesting concept, but they're not all entertaining for me. Like, I don't find myself being as entertained by them as I would be for other movies. So we only watched 2 of them, but those 2 kind of felt the same way, where it's just like a lot of crazy weird shit that has a lot of story importance, but I don't find myself being that entertained by them, unfortunately. But they're still good movies, and Hereditary was one of those. Air Force One with Harrison Ford, solid A tier movie. Actually, even higher than that, S tier. Higher than The Matrix, even, I would say. I don't know. This list, a lot of these S tiers could definitely change, but right now I think this is solid. But I love the Air Force One. It was almost like Die Hard on a plane, but that was an awesome concept to do. So it made everything so much more intense because they're on a plane. So obviously it's going to be more intense. Of course, you have Gary Oldman in this movie, and he is great as the villain. He is just such a fantastic part of this film. A lot of other great actors and actresses as well, but Harrison Ford, I mean, I've only seen him in, like, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and then this, and also Blade Runner. But there's other movies of his I have to see, because I always love him in every role I've seen him in. He's always just a lot of fun to watch. He's a great actor. So the way this movie played out, especially how it played out towards the end, very iconic, very awesome. It deserves S tier for sure. All right, next up we got the John Wick trilogy. This will be easy. S, probably a bit lower than that though. And also S. That whole trilogy is a massive dub. I'm gonna move myself over a little bit. That whole trilogy is just phenomenal. It automatically became one of my favorite franchises of all time, just from those 3 movies. The 4th one coming out, it was supposed to come out this year, but now it got delayed to 2023, unfortunately. But I'm very excited for that, because Keanu Reeves, man, in these movies, he kicks ass all the way through. And even just the story and the universe and the world building that these movies do is just so phenomenal. So it's hard not to give them all S tiers, but I think I definitely enjoyed them less as they went along, which I hate to say that, but that's just how it was. And that's not a bad thing, because I don't enjoy them that much less. It's just a little bit less. You know what I mean? It's not like they're getting really worse, like Matrix, where they're like getting a lot worse, and the third one was like all the way down here. This is like they're all still S tier. It's just I prefer the first one over the other ones, just in my opinion. But still awesome movies. The Conjuring, definitely A. Probably like right here, right there. Conjuring was really good. It was one of the best in terms of the shots and the directing style, because James Wan has just become one of my favorite directors, just because of movies like this and Aquaman, and definitely because of Malignant. Malignant was one of my favorites. We'll talk about that really soon, actually. But James Wan's directing is something that I just like so much. The shots he does in these movies is just beyond amazing. Like what he's able to do with this camera, and it's like things that I don't even know how he does, and I would love to watch some behind the scenes footage of these movies, because it's crazy some of the shots they do. But even just the story itself, I don't normally like ghost movies. I don't really find them to be that interesting usually, but this one is definitely the best one that I've seen of that genre. So I'm all in. I want to see the sequel. I have yet to see the sequel yet. We're going to probably react to that soon, at least. So definitely look out for that. Psycho. Psycho I would definitely give a solid, probably bottom of, above Reloaded for sure, but yeah, around here. Psycho was really solid. Psycho is the oldest movie I've done, and people were freaking out on me on that video because they were like, I said in the beginning that I don't tend to watch older movies that are like in the 60s, and they're like getting really pissed, but that was just my preference. I just don't tend to watch movies from those eras. But I still thought it was really solid, even regardless of that. I mean, just from a technical standpoint, in terms of what it was able to do in that time, I mean, it was a really, really well thought out movie, and I definitely enjoyed the second half of it a lot more than the first half. And my issues with it are issues that I think a lot of older movies probably have, which is just a lot of, I guess, dragged out time, which sometimes I think that's a good thing when there's tension building. But some of it's like, for example, when the guy was like cleaning up the thing after he killed the girl. I forget the girl's name, but when he killed the girl in the shower after he was cleaning up the house or the motel, it was like a 7-minute scene of him cleaning up. Well, we didn't have to watch that for 7 minutes. Like, you know what I mean? I get it's older movies, so it's like different. That's just how they were kind of made. But I think that's one of my main criticisms for the movie. But because you don't see that as much today, it's usually a lot faster than that. And I don't think that's a weird thing to complain about. Like, it makes sense if you have a long dragged out scene like that, it has to be important. It has to be important for the story. It has to have some sort of meaning. Or if it's tension building, like Halloween did a great job of tension building with longer dragged out scenes. But there was no tension building there. We already saw him kill the girl. Now you're just showing him cleaning up the house for 7 minutes. We don't need to see that. So that was my main complaints that held it from being this masterpiece that everyone told me it was, but still is A tier for everything else that it was able to do, and a lot of the interesting shots and very iconic shots for sure. So I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, to be honest. So yeah, it's deserving of A tier. Malignant, it's gonna be pretty high, but I'm not sure how high. Probably above The Sixth Sense right there. That's good. Malignant was phenomenal. I really love this movie. I talked about it a lot on my ranking of my top 10 favorite movies of 2021, so definitely go check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, there's not much else to say about it other than it was fucking phenomenal. Dune, I'm gonna put bottom of A. That might be low for some people, but I loved it. It was not my top 10 of 2021. It was just outside of the top 10. Probably would be like 11 or 12. I gave it an honorable mention because from a technical standpoint, it was a beautifully done movie, beautiful directing, beautiful shots. The soundtrack was amazing, but I definitely wasn't as entertained by it as I wish I was, maybe. I don't know, that's just my opinion. I just didn't find the story as riveting as some people did, but especially towards the end of the movie, I started to kind of feel more interested in it. I'm very excited to see where it goes in the second film, because I'm sure the second film can do a lot more that maybe will keep me more interested. But this one, not as good as I was hoping, but from a technical standpoint, yes, it was fantastic. The Fly is going to get bottom of S. Actually, I'll go even above The Matrix. The Fly was one of the coolest body horror movies I've ever seen. Jeff Goldblum was fantastic in this, so was Gina Davis. They played off each other very well. They had great chemistry, obviously, so that made it a lot more interesting. And it was also a very sad ending that I didn't expect to see coming, but it was such an interesting downfall of his character because of what he did to himself with his teleportation, with this fly, and seeing him turn to a fly was just fucking gross, and I loved every second of that grossness. So thank you to all of you who recommended this, because it was definitely a must-watch for me. So yeah, definitely deserves S. Trick or Treat, I'm gonna put like bottom of B. I enjoyed it, but I thought it was such a weird movie that I didn't get the point of, you know what I mean? Like, it was such a cool, interesting concept for a movie, but I never felt like it was a movie that I had to watch or anything. Like, I never felt like it was a must-see. It was a bunch of random stories that had some connections and kind of played together, and interesting concept, but I wouldn't say it's a incredible, fantastic movie or anything. I would just say it's okay. It's all right. Midsommar, top of B. No, before Mortal Kombat. Yeah, right there. Same thing I said for Hereditary. Like, it was very much a movie I appreciated in a lot of how it was done, but I also didn't find it to be that entertaining all the way through, because a lot of it was kind of, you know, your typical dragged out tension building stuff, which works for some people, doesn't always work for me, and it didn't really work as much as I wish it did, but still B tier is still pretty damn high, so I can't, you know, can't say I didn't love it, because I did. I love a lot of these movies. Like, I enjoy my time watching a lot of these, man. It's hard for me to not like a movie. Django Unchained is easy S for sure. Definitely my favorite movie from Tarantino so far. Yes, I liked it even more than Pulp Fiction, so that's not a hard choice for me. The Goonies, I'm gonna give it bottom of A. Definitely a fun movie. You know, I don't think it was necessarily something I'm gonna think about all the time in the same way a lot of other people might. A lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for it, of course, because it was definitely a very big movie in the 80s, but I just had fun with it. I liked the characters. They were a lot of fun. It was a fun cast of characters and an interesting little story, interesting little adventure that they went on, but it's not a movie that's going to stick with me and, you know, be something that I'm going to think of all that much, to be honest, but I enjoyed it regardless. Next up, Knives Out. Very surprised to love this movie as much as I did. I did not expect to at all. It's going to go up here. That's a solid spot for us. One of the most interesting movies I watched. One of the most invested, one of the most invested I've been. I can't even word this properly. One of the movies that I've been the most invested in during my time watching it, because of this interesting mystery that was going on in the story. And I was glued to the screen the whole time, even though I wasn't expecting to be before going into it. Daniel Craig was phenomenal in this movie. He was one of the best parts of it, of course. And I would love to see a sequel, because I've heard they are doing a sequel and Daniel Craig is going to come back, but all the other characters aren't, which is fine. But the cast itself was just phenomenal in this movie. That's definitely one of the strongest suits of it. You had a lot of characters, a lot of people that had some really amazing pieces of dialogue with one another. And the way it all played out was very interesting, very entertaining. Great movie. Did not expect to love it, but I did. The Shawshank Redemption, that's easy S as well. Probably up here. This movie, from a storytelling standpoint, was one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. It had some of the best themes, some of the best messages and quotes, and it's all about redemption, and that's exactly what it does. But mainly for Red's character, because he was the one who actually had a redemption, whereas why am I forgetting his name? The main character, the character played by Tim Robbins, his character was one that didn't really need to redeem himself, because he never really actually killed anyone, but he was more redeeming himself in his mind, where it was like he was still thinking about doing it, so it made sense that it would be something that would fuck him up mentally. You know, he almost felt like he had to stay there because he even thought about it, but then eventually he was like, no, you know, I didn't do it. And then, you know, further story aspects prove that he was innocent, and it's the way it plays out from then on there is just so, it's a beautiful movie, man. I just love the friendship between Red and Tim Robbins' character as well, and I need to rewatch this thing because it was that good. I watched it very recently. This was like a month ago, so I love that movie, man. It was so good. Matrix Resurrections, the newest Matrix movie. I honestly don't really like it that much. I'm gonna put it in C tier, just because I didn't find myself I liked it more than Revolutions at least, but I don't know, man. I think the story was interesting, sure, but not nearly as much as what the first one was. Definitely not. I felt like it was unnecessary in a lot of ways. It kind of just retreaded a lot of what the first one did, but not in a more interesting way. You know what I mean? And the action was pretty bad. Like, probably some of the worst action from this franchise so far. Like, it was just poorly shot and choreographed, which I don't know how that's possible. You're in 2021, but whatever. Oh well. Krampus, I'm gonna put A tier. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it more than no, I did love it. I actually loved it. Just a lot more than Trick or Treat, which I believe was by the same director. I liked it more because it was just one story, just one full-on thing. Definitely one of the most enjoyable Christmas horror movies out there. Not better than Gremlins, though, obviously, but still one of my favorite Christmas horror movies now that I've seen it. And it might be something I have to rewatch next Christmas because, yeah, I feel like it's deserving of that. And last but not least, Last Night in Soho, which did sneak its way into my top 10 favorite movies of 2021. I watched this literally a couple days ago, and I'm gonna put it right in front of Psycho. I think it's a good spot for it. I liked Last Night in Soho, man. I did. It was one of the most interesting movies of this year. You're gonna see my reaction to it eventually, and if you want to hear my full thoughts on it, I talked about a lot more in that video that I posted recently, ranking my top 10 favorite movies of 2021. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this tier ranker. No movies got in D tier, not a single one of them, so I can just delete that row. That just proves to me I don't really hate many movies that I react to on this channel because you guys recommend good stuff usually, so it's hard for me to hate these movies when you guys recommend pretty damn good stuff. And I also can kind of just tell usually if I'm gonna like or dislike a movie. Sometimes, not all the time. Obviously I'm wrong in a lot of cases because I didn't think I'd like Knives Out, and I did, so that's one case of me liking a movie a lot more than I thought. So yeah, this is my final list here. I think it's pretty solid. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.